I think Oklahoma's really fighting for bowl eligibility at this point. They've got to improve where they stay or they currently are at right now. Because you still haven't played Texas. Obviously, that's this week. You still haven't played Baylor. You still haven't played Oklahoma State. Granted, two of those three games are at home, but still, and you've got a couple of tricky games away from home. So, they've got to be in a position to try to do everything they can to right this ship as quickly as possible. And I don't know that the capability is there just yet. The one thing I guess you take with a um, maybe with a grain of salt is if you eliminate some of those busts, then maybe they're not big plays, but still TCU was able to move the ball, even if it wasn't big plays at a fairly consistent level throughout the game. So, in a team, we'll see how they continue to go through the season for TCU. But a team for me that I thought was probably middle of the pack, Big 12, maybe lower middle. But I mean, you give a little bit of credit where it's due. They had a great game plan. They played really well. Doug and this, of course, it's a lot easier when you're throwing to wide open players, obviously. But he's throwing the ball at a much more efficient level than he ever has. But it was that a product of Oklahoma making him look much better than what he is, or so we'll see as we continue to move forward. But Oklahoma's got a lot of problems right now, and it's not just on the defensive side. Offensively, when you looked at that when Gabriel was in the game, kind of the same thing that we've seen a pattern of over the last, just overthrowing wide open receivers time and time again. And he was bad early on in that game, just in terms. I mean, he threw a great ball to Braden Willis for the long touchdown, or the long play that went down to the one. Um, but other than that, was constant overthrowing and not setting his feet, and mechanics were a little bit off, and things like that. So, um, and then you brought Davis Bevel in, and he looked like that game was going a million miles an hour for him when he was in the game. Was never even remotely comfortable. So now you go into a game week against Texas, not really knowing who the quarterback's going to be. They've not really. I know that Gabriel's not practiced as of yesterday from my understanding. So I would be surprised if he's out there. I think the negative precedence that the Dolphins had with Tua, I think is going to permeate through the college game as well, just in terms of making sure that these kids are just more than ready to play. If there's just a slimmer of doubt, then they won't. They're not gonna. The medical staffs aren't gonna clear these kids. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, and if there's some conversation, who's your quarterback. I know that Bevel has been the number two guy, but he looked awful against TCU. So who puts you in the best position to play? There's been a lot of talk about Nick Evers might be the guy. He's improved quite a bit from the beginning of the fall camp to where he's at now, that he could be a guy that Oklahoma leans on if Gabriel's unable to go.
To your point, Jason, about the Big 12, for as much as we at times knock the Big 12, and justifiably so, for not having a top-end elite program or two, the conference doesn't have an easy out. So when you talk about Oklahoma fighting for bowl eligibility, that very much could be the situation. You look at the entire schedule in the Big 12 and the entire league, there's not an easy out. There's not Northwestern, there's not Vanderbilt, there's not Colorado. Those teams don't exist. And we thought Kansas was the worst team without even thinking about it. That's obviously not the case. We just saw TCU, which I consider to be a mystery team going into this game. Well, they just hung up 55 points. Every one of these teams has played capable football this year. They have shown that they may not be great teams. They may not even be consistent teams, but on a given week, they're good. They're capable. They're capable of beating a good team. Texas Tech, West Virginia, they're probably at the lower end. They're not they're not automatic outs by any stretch.